Welcome, pool guys and gals, to the Let's Talk About Pools podcast, where your host, Lauren Broom, will take a splash into many topics in the pool industry to educate all aquatic professionals. Listen in, and you just might be surprised what you'll learn. So let's jump right in.
Welcome, everybody, today to the Let's Talk About Pools podcast. And today's special guest is Steve Barnes with Aquastar Pool Products. He will be giving us the 2021 updates to the Virginia Graham-Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act, VGB, in regards to the main drain covers for manufacturers, which will roll down to you guys, the listeners, as pool contractors and builders. I want to say thank you to Aquastar Pool Products and poolmarketing.com for being sponsors of the podcast today. Thank you for being part of education to our industry.
You may already know Aquastar Pool Products is a leading maker of VGBA-compliant drain covers. But are you aware of all the other products that Aquastar offers, such as skimmers and autofills, deck drains, cleaners and cleaner parts, mosaics, ozone and chemical feeders, and spa jets and fittings? For more information, visit aquastarpoolproducts.com.
Welcome, everybody, today to Let's Talk About Pools podcast. And on my episode today, I have Steve Barnes, who's the Director of Science and Compliance with Aquastar Pool Products. And he's also the Chairman of the Drain Cover Standard Writing Committee. Welcome today, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on because I know that this is a big thing here, getting these updates out so that people are aware, that are everybody in the aquatic industry that might be listening into this podcast, which I have such a varied audience out there, from parks and rec to pool builders, pool contractors, community association managers, apartment maintenance, anybody that's involved with a swimming pool. They're going to want to listen to this so that they know what is coming down the pike and what's happening with the VGB, the Virginia Graham-Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act standard.
Part 2.0.
There we go.
Well, not quite. It's not going to be quite as interesting as 2009 and 10 and all of that, but there is a lot more coming. It's that interesting for us manufacturers, but it won't be quite so interesting for installers. And hopefully the new changes will be very helpful for our building and health officials who actually inspect our public pools.
Yay. Awesome.
So with that, let me introduce myself. I am Steve Barnes. I'm Director of Science and Compliance for Aquastar Pool Products. I am the chairman of ANSI APSP 16-2017. That is the federal drain cover law. So it's the only standard we have in the pool industry that's actually directly referenced in federal law. Therefore, the standard is federal law, or certainly portions of it. And so it's, I approach this, yes, certainly I work for Aquastar, but we are very committed to public education and helping our industry succeed. I'm standing in our lab. We've done a lot of research that's then used for developing codes and standards. And I think right at the top, it's helpful to understand my philosophy, our philosophy, the PHTA's philosophy is we want meaningful codes that help health and safety and others on energy efficiency, performance of equipment, tightly integrated with what we do with NSF. And so it's a very holistic approach. And what we want is my philosophy is we want as light a touch as possible while protecting public safety. And when we're talking about drain covers in particular, and drowning prevention, we understand and know the 5 hazards associated with suction entrapment, hair, body being the one everyone understands. The dual drains solve that. Our Florida pools with gravity drainage system solves that. But there's a lot more to it, and it's more complicated. Most of that falls on the drain cover manufacturer. The tough one is hair. because that totally, the hair follows the water into the drain cover and then into the pipe. So that relationship between the drain cover and that suction pipe or multiple suction pipes plays a big role in the drain cover flow rating. And that's really a big part of the focus of this standard. So in addition to the drain cover, I am also co-chair of the PHTA's, the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, their technical committee. And so overseeing that, I'm a voting member of the International Swimming Pool and Spa Codes, so the ISPSC. A lot of the same requirements that we see in Florida and certainly around the country come from that. I was also the founding chairman of APSP 15, the Energy Efficiency Standard. So many in Florida will remember me. We had the first version of that was a challenge with variable speed pumps and single speed. So I've been around for a long time. I've been in the industry since 1984, 37 something years.
That's a long time. That's a long time and a lot of experience.
Yeah, I've been in the lab environment the whole time in safety and compliance. Also, as a side, we just coming out of the 4th of July holiday. I shot fireworks professionally for 34 years.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I've had a very interesting life, fire and water, involved in horses. And now my love is commuting on a 3-wheeled motorcycle. So risk management, some people question whether I really exercise that, but I have all my after 34 years. So I believe in, we want to have fun as society, but we need to protect safety. And there's a meaningful way to do that. So, exactly. So here's just, picture me in this lab. Covered a lot of this stuff already just now. So I'll continue on. Relative to the lab I'm standing in, it is, this is an ISO 17025 testing site for NSF. So we do, you can see there on the left of what says tank 1. So those are robotics. And so we're using that to test the body and hair entrapment in this lab. And as you'll see, there'll be lots of information that come with each drain cover. And so our philosophy here at Aquastar is we test, we don't guess. And so there'll be changes, but it should be pretty manageable. And with all of that, let's get into the meat of this. And so what we want to cover today, and this is this PowerPoint we're looking at was actually a PowerPoint that was done for the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance. And this was an overview that was really directed at CPOs, building and health officials, kind of here's what's coming. But I'd recommend certainly that you go back and watch this. But this presentation, what we're going to focus on today is what really needs to happen at the contractor level, the inspection level. This is going to be a little more nuts and bolts for those who actually do this work. But we'll cover what's changed with the standard. What does it mean for the installation contractor? We'll make that our focus today. Action required by our pool pros. And then we'll touch on resources available to you. Q&A, it's just the two of us, so we can just answer questions as we go. So
awesome.
So let's get started with the VGB standard overview. So one of the things I want to call out right from the beginning is this is an overview. There's a lot of engineering detail associated with public pools where an engineer or architect or other registered design professional does the design and certification for those large area grates, typically, the 18 by 36, 24 by 24, the big stuff. Okay, so your water part. I'm not going into those details because one, we got engineers that handle that. Hopefully they know that the standard is changed effective May 24th. Excuse me. May 24th, 2021. So just a month or so ago when we're recording this. So, but just that disclaimer so that this is not the end all for compliance. So one of the very first things that people are asking is why is it changing again? When we look at the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission statistics, where the VGB Act policies have been implemented, it's 100% successful. So why did we need to change it? Well, at the core is it's an American national standard. In all American national standards, it could be for pumps, filters, it doesn't matter. Anything that has an ANSI standard has to be reviewed every 5 years and either reaffirm nothing needs to change or any changes are made. If that is not done, at the end of 10 years, it goes away. This standard is adopted into federal law, as I mentioned earlier, so we definitely have to stay on top of it as a society and standard writers, and certainly the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, who is the standard development organization. So that's why it's changing. The reason it wasn't reaffirmed is really, this is the first revision to the 2007, the ASME ANSI A112 19.8. So that's what we saw. That was the version that was adopted into federal law. Now, it did move from ASME to the APSP, now the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, in 2011, but there was no changes. It was a branding change, basically, and fixed a couple of typos. So really, we went a full 10 years without changing the standard.
That's a long time.
Yeah. And in the meantime, there was other drama in 2011 about how some of the drain covers were tested and the body block test, at the root cause analysis that we went through on that. The standard wasn't clear that you had to use a pump on high speed. It just was silent on that. It said flow, but nothing about suction. And so in 2011, the CPSC clarified that because they have that authority and required all of the drain covers to be retested for body block. And it had some other technical differences about how they were mounted and variable speed pump and size of the blocking element that simulates someone laying on. So it was pretty technical, and they clarified a bunch of things as part of the retest. And then we saw drain covers get taller, have riser rings, and all that kind of stuff that happened in 2013. So all of that was clarified and put into the standard. And then really the rest of it is clarifying. There's additional testing for manufacturers, but it's to give everyone more information before they buy the product, so that you know what's its flow rate, what's its compatibility, all of the details that our contractors need to be successful is now laid out in advance, and that'll happen over time. So there's a couple of new things in it. Let me start with some, the high level. And that is, there's a new term called suction outlet fitting assembly, or SOFAs. And that's been used in ANSI 7. It's probably not a new term to most in Florida, because Florida is kind of out in front on all of this. But for the rest of the country, they're like, well, a sofa? What are you talking about? So, and basically it just is clarifying that under federal law, when you're talking about drain covers, they mean the suction outlet fitting assembly, not literally just the cover. So that's just clarifying that, and it becomes shorthand. I can tell you, as a standard writing, this acronym came up, and we tried to come up with something else. We just, this is terrible. Don't sit on the sofa. We had all the jokes pre-planned, but really it's the most applicable. Yeah, don't sit on the sofa. So anyway, it's kind of, we didn't like it, but it's like, well, it works, and people seem to remember it. So another big change is sofa configurations. So we're talking about everything between the cover and the pipe. And whether it be us as a manufacturer or a registered design professional, the guys and gals that do the water park stuff, is we must, a sofa configuration is specified where any difference in the mounting orientation, whether it's on the wall or a floor, suction pipe opening size, so the size of the pipe in the sump, or suction pipe orientation, whether it goes out the bottom of the sump or the side, results in a different sofa model number. The significance of all of that is when you're doing the hair testing, the hair goes in, and the deeper the pipe, the less hair goes into it. And then if the pipe is to the side, now the hair goes in and makes a turn. Now you put that same cover move it from the floor to the wall. Now the hair makes 2 turns. And so all of that affects the effort or how much force you have to remove the hair from the test. And it's a very, very conservative, stringent test. You're only allowed 5 pounds of pull. And to put that in context, if you take 4 or 5 hairs and then pull them, that will far exceed 5 pounds. 5 hairs is like 10 pounds. So if you tangle just a few hairs in the drain cover, you're going to fail this standard and will have to lower the flow rating until the suction force is low enough that that hair pulls out easily. That's what we're doing here in the lab. That's why we're using robotics.
And not real people. You're not using real people?
No. I'll admit that when we were originally developing this, we went from a ponytail test. This standard dates back to 1987. 2 years after I started in the industry, goodness gracious. And it had a ponytail only. There was no body block test. So the big changes in 2007 was a full head of hair. So, and we use a mannequin head. But when we were proposing this, there was a simulation done in a backyard pool. And then I was working for another drain cover manufacturer at the time. We were designing a cover. So we put on wigs, blonde-headed wigs. Oh. There is not a picture of me wearing this. I've got several of other people, but and we would swim down and see, okay, how does it behave? Knowing full well, if the wig got stuck, we were coming back to the surface without a problem. As for body block tests, during that 2011 period when we were retesting, I did a lot of personal where I stuck myself to drains. And one of the motivations for me, I don't advertise it too much, but it is relevant, is I was stuck on a public pool main drain for 1 minute, 10 seconds when I was 13 or 14.
Wow.
And so we had a swim. This was a public pool, a water park kind of a thing, and largely my own fault, but I had the help of a young lifeguard. He was old to me, but anyway, between the two of us, we got in a stupid situation. But what that did for me is, this is serious. Don't play around with it. But at the same time, I was very fortunate to grow up in Arizona with a residential swimming pool and lived in this thing. I mean, when it's 120 degrees outside, you spend a lot of time in the water.
A lot of time in the pool.
Yeah. So I never lost my love for water, but I had a new respect for these things on the bottom of swimming pools. And so it's like fireworks. I mentioned I did that. You got to be extremely respectful of it, public safety, crew safety, and all that. But at the same time, when it's done correctly and safely, we all have a good time. So,
well, and you were smart because you made sure you didn't have any lasting pictures of you wearing a yellow, blonde wig.
Yeah, I was born at night, but not last night. So, yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent there. But so the sofa configurations, and I want to emphasize that, is each one of these changes. So if you buy a sump bucket, or you have a pool with a plastic sump bucket that could be either 2 inch or 1.5 inches, each one of those is going to have its own flow rating, because that small pipe, especially with these modern variable speed pumps that are going on them, they can move way more water than the original design was contemplated. Let's put it that way. So no one did anything wrong. It's just now we know, oh, okay, this thing's got a lot of suction. It's like the shop vac sticking to the carpet, right? And if you move the shop vac a foot away, you're not going to pick up the carpet, nor are you going to pick up the dirt on the carpet, right? So that's why it's the same physics for air and water. And that's why the depth of the pipe really matters to the flow rate. So another thing for designers and installers, there's 2 new categories of drains that were included, and that's maintenance drain and fire suppression water source outlet. Maintenance drain is like a bathtub. It's literally, you open a valve behind the pool and it drains to waste, wherever that may be. These are the old fill and drain pools. They are still out there, and a lot of them just have big open pipes because they're not used. So all this says is put a cover over it. We don't care what the cover is. Just to put any VGB cover over it that fits, none of that matters. And then the fire suppression is very important, especially in the rural areas where you have pools that don't have a municipal water supply. They may be on well water, whatever. So that pool becomes a great source of water for firefighting. And so, but you need submerged suction outlets because they're going to drain the pool to fight the fire. So they need to be drains in the classic sense, but how do you size the pump? Well, what truck's going to hook up to it? We don't know. So similar to the maintenance drain, we don't care what size they are, what the flow rate, any of that. Whoever does that engineering, obviously they're going to size the big pipe to go to the curb or wherever. So we let the engineers and the architects handle that stuff. But under federal law, as soon as anything is fully submerged in a swimming pool, spa, water park, it falls under the VGB Act. So we wanted to create a home for these two concepts just to be easy. So those are the three real big new things in there. There's a lot more detail for us manufacturers and test labs, but that's the key. So this is directly from the standard, and I'll quote, "To assist users in selecting an appropriate cover grade for the application, the standard now requires certain information to be made available prior to acquiring the physical product." And so that's the product specifications that you installers and inspectors will need to know, does this comply? Is it the right size? And it's like sizing a pump or a filter. You got to know, what is it? So I know which one to buy. So this information is now required to be provided in advance. And that's a tool to help people be, successful, so that you don't get to the job site and, this doesn't fit, or this isn't appropriate. That puts our contractors in an awkward situation, and some make bad decisions and try and use an inappropriate product. So we want to help our contractors be more successful. And one of the things of those is, because we now are testing pipe sizes and sump depths, and each one of those is getting a different flow rating, the old figure 2 has been removed. And I'm going to jump ahead a couple of slides, and then we'll back up to those that we just covered. So the old figure 2 is the lower left, and it says obsolete and the big no on it, but all that means is this general 1.5 pipe diameters that was used previously, and that keeps the shop vac away from the carpeting, kind of a concept. That keeps the pipe away from the underside of the cover, is the point of that. That is absolutely still allowed, but instead of 1.5D and the D for pipe diameter that puts all of that on the contractor's shoulders to figure it out and hopefully do it right, is the contract, or the manufacturer now has to provide the information you see on the right, which is the new figure 2. And it basically just defines the shape. The critical things that we're after are A, which is the pipe depth, and then obviously the pipe size itself. And so relative to figure 2 that's in the current standard, as I mentioned, manufacturers will continue to use that, but they're going to put dimensions to it. Or it may be a table where it says, okay, if it's 2-inch pipe, it's 1.5 inches down, or 2.5 inches, 3 inches down. It's morning here. So you get the idea. Yes. So the key is there's going to be more information all about the hair entering this pipe, resulting in a different flow rate. Now, one of the things I want to talk about that's that I haven't mentioned previously is the hair test is 16 inches long. So it's 5.5 ounces of human hair mounted to a mannequin head, and it's 16 inches long. So the hair can reach 16 inches through the cover and into the pipe. And that's why and if the hair can reach pipe, then it gets its own flow rating. If a manufacturer, and you will see this in water park kind of stuff, if they move, typically it's big pipe, 10, 12 inches, down 17 inches, for example, the hair can't reach it. So it doesn't matter the pipe size. Now you're just going on the flow rating of the grate. In these cases, they're grates. And so you wouldn't have to worry about what pipe size, because the hair can't reach it. That is in the standard. But most cases, the pipes are a lot shallower than that. that's when you'll need to look at individual flow rates. And so now I'll go up a slide. And here's just some hypothetical flow rates. And I'm not sure if our video is covering. Can you see the full slide?
I will move our video over just in case. So now we can see the whole thing. Yes. Okay.
And for those listening on the podcast, thank you for joining us first and foremost. So, but what I'm looking at is it's a table of, I got Acme flow, an 8-inch round drain and a 10-inch round drain. And then below that is, so I'll talk about the top one, 8-inch round drain with 2-inch pipe out the bottom. Actually, I'm going to go to the 10-inch because that I can see. So a 10-inch round cover, 2-inch pipe out the round bottom. It has a flow rating of 105 gallons a minute. If we take that same drain cover and put it on 2-inch pipe out the side, so now the ports in the side of it, the hair has to go through the cover and make a turn into the pipe. That flow rating is 88. And as I mentioned, because of the 5 pounds of pull, the difference between those two flow ratings is the hair is pulling around a corner now. And so that changes the flow rate. This, in essence, is what's making the difference. Also, we have, for example, the wall. So 2-inch on the floor is 105. In some cases, it's the same. Others, it will change. Bigger drain covers have higher flow ratings. Deeper pipe has higher flow ratings. Larger pipe has larger flow ratings. All of that makes sense to all of us who have been dealing with this, but now there'll be a flow rate for each of these. So that's the critical difference that's changed. And so it's going to be a lot more information.
Hey, everybody. Just a slight intermission because I want to say thank you to our co-sponsor for today's podcast episode, which is poolmarketing.com. I want to thank them so much for being a co-sponsor of the Let's Talk About Pools podcast.
You may be wondering, why do my competitors always show up ahead of me on Google? You want to know how you can get your website to the top of the search engines fast? You've been racking your brain thinking of who can help you with your website's search rank. Well, wonder no more. Poolmarketing.com specializes in SEO for pool companies and can get you to the top of the search engines in no time.
So we've talked about the sump depth and pipe size, figure 2 versus the new figure 5, and the information that the manufacturers are going to be providing in the future. So I think the obvious question is, how do I know which? And so I would say the number one thing everyone listening and watching this podcast should understand is this will be a multi-year transition. So it's a manufacturer's change. So May 24th, 2021, manufacturers had to switch from the VGB 2008 standard to the VGB Act, VGBA 2017 standard. And it requires all this new information, but it's a manufacturer's rolling change. So it's just like in 2013 when pool heater efficiency at the federal level went from 76 to 82%. Well, on a Friday, they could be making 76% efficient heaters, and they couldn't make them on Monday. So it's entirely possible and likely that you're going to get, in that time frame, you could have 2 different efficiency heaters on the same truck. A contractor would go to pool distribution. They don't know which one. It's whatever they had. So you aren't going to know what you're getting until it's in your hand, although it'll be on packaging and boxes.
Is it based on supply and demand, basically? On what,
yeah.
What
and because of the whole craziness that with people doing so much in their backyards because of the whole COVID-19 thing, is I'm sure everyone who's listening knows it's hard to get products. It's hard for manufacturers to get raw materials. And here's a shocker for you. we're running out of white VGB 2008 covers. Right. So if you want powder blue, can we make a deal for you? Kind of a thing. So, but the key here, in all seriousness, is it's going to take time for this stuff to roll in. And so what you're going to have to do is look at the drain cover in your hand. And you could, on the screen, we have two. They're identical covers. The one on the left is to VGB 2008. The one on the right is to the 2017. Now, this particular model has a dot in the middle, and the blue dot is the newly certified stuff, because we are now certified with NSF here at Aquastar. The old stuff has teal or some other color. So we, on some of our covers, we're giving you an indication what it is. But in any case, everybody's covers is going to be marked with either the old markings. It could be VGB 2008, ASME A112-19A8, APSP ANSI 2011. 16, 2011. So there's a lot of things that could be that mean the VGB 2008. The VGB 2017 will always be marked VGBA 2017 on it. That's how you're going to know. And what you have to do is follow the instructions that come with or were associated with that version of the standard. So there's going to be a lot more information in the new drain cover instructions, and there may be little to none in the old stuff because it just wasn't required. And so that was one of the big changes, is to get more information into the hands. One of the challenges is you could get dual drain replacements out of distribution and get one of each. And that's kind of the head scratcher that I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be fun.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. So the thing I could tell you there, because it's coming, right, is what you can always follow the new instructions that'll have more flow rates for the same cover, like the two we're looking on. So you can use the 2017 comfortably on an old drain cover. But what you cannot do is use the old drain cover information and apply it to the installation of the new one. That's the rub for the installers. So you can always go to the new requirements, but you can't go backwards. So that's the gotcha that I want to really point out. And what this side says, you must ask, what version of the standard is this product in my hand certified? It's going to be VGB 2008, and that's all of the old listings that I just rattled off, or VGBA 2017. And that's really, if you got that, you're in good shape.
Yeah. So I hope everybody's just listen to that.
Yeah, that's the key takeaway for all of that. So now I'm going to jump back up a little bit and kind of cover some stuff that should be old news to everyone, but it's still very important. So one of the things, before I get into what's really important, I've just popped up on the screen a bunch of head loss curves, and they're visually, it's like pump curves, only it's system. So it goes from 0 up versus a pump curve at 0. It's real high head to low, So this is, and all this is on the top line, it's A, then there's another one, C, B, and D. They jump down on the flow cut, and that's A is 1.5-inch pipe, C is 2-inch pipe. And so what happens is the smaller the pipe, the higher the head loss. This information will be provided by the manufacturer, and it will be very helpful in Florida, where for new design primarily, but I suppose it'd be useful for existing pools where you have gravity drainage systems. And so it's knowing the friction loss through the drain cover or suction outlet fitting assembly is important from an engineering point of view. So again, this is more information that will help certainly new construction. You can look at this and know, 1.5-inch pipe's not as good as big pipe, and not real news, but helpful. So one of the things that is clarified now in federal law, the federal law in 2007 introduced a term called unblockable. We saw it before that in 2006, some months earlier, in ANSI APSP-7, the Suction Entrapment Avoidance Standard. But it was Congress who defined the term unblockable. And the way it's used is if you have a unblockable drain, then you can have just one in the pool. You don't need two of them. If you have a single blockable drain, so it's an old school single drain pool, then in that case, you could have a body suction entrapment hazard. And so then we want to see two drains for new construction. Or if you got a retrofit, you would go back to an SVRS, a automatic pump shutoff. Certainly in Florida with gravity drainage, there's a lot of 12 by 12s that were built back in the day to gravity drainage. As long as you have a VGB cover, you're compliant. The key here is really this impacts new construction because it allows for single unblockable drains. And what we have shown here is a graphic of a channel drain, a 32-inch channel drain, and then the body blocking element. So if you picture from your shoulders to your hip, that's the 18 by 23 blocking element that we physically test in the test tanks behind me. And then that determines the flow rating based on the body block. Then we run hair tests on each of the pipe sizes, and whichever of those two is lower sets the flow rate for the system.
Oh, so interesting.
Yeah, so it's one or the other. So if it's a flat flush mount round drain, the old flat ones like Virginia Graham Baker was entrapped on, they don't pass the test. So that's why blockable drains, basically 18 by 18 or smaller, they stick up or they can't pass the test. So that's why the smaller the drain, the more they stick up off the floor, off the wall of the pool, is to pass that test. And so this term is defined in the standard, it's defined in federal law, and it's tested. And so now each cover will be marked, whether it's unblockable or blockable, so that there's no guessing, there's no measuring, because it's a technical standard. You know, that it has to be bigger than 18 by 23 in one direction and have a force that doesn't exceed table 1. As a public health official in your past, what would you do with that? Wasn't very helpful. No. So this clarifies if it's unblockable, here's its flow rating, and we're just done. And then, so we don't have to guess anymore. That's prescribed.
Well, what you're doing is you're saying, manufacturer, you give me the information so that you're not trying to get all these different people to try to interpret it and measure things, and they decide it's what they think it is. Now we're saying manufacturer that's putting this product out, they're going to mark it. They're going to say it's blockable or unblockable, and the contractor's not making that decision anymore. That's right. It's being made by the manufacturer, and you don't have 10 different health departments that are determining is it blockable or unblockable. It's going to be all set in industry at one spot, so you don't have an interpretation issue, which is an awesome deal in the industry.
And to give our health departments and building officials confidence in what manufacturers are saying. Mm-hmm. So we have also added to the standard that it's under section 131 prohibited certifications. This is new. Manufactured sofas or registered design professional sofas that are not evaluated to all applicable section or fail any applicable requirement of this standard shall not be certified. And so the reason for that is under the old standard, some people will certifying the cover or maybe just the sump and not the cover and giving it a certification. There was nothing in federal law that prohibited you from doing that. And so that was a giant loophole that was plugged. I mean, I don't know that probably anyone's had one of those covers in your hand because they're not what you are accustomed to seeing, but they were out there in obscure markets. So, but another thing to the point of making our health officials more comfortable is required testing and certification is everything has to be tested in an ISO 17025 certified lab, like the one I'm standing in, although we only do 2 tests, hair and body. The rest of it is handled by NSF. And then that test report has to be evaluated by an ISO 17065 certifying agency, and that agency reviews the specifications, the instructions, the test reports. So it's highly regulated now from a manufacturer's perspective and test lab perspective, just like our pump motors and heaters, because this is a life safety product. They look simple. I remember, how hard can this be? It's a piece of plastic with 2 screws. Well, it's because of the hair, it's a lot more involved. And so I say that so that health officials and building officials can have a high degree of confidence in the information in these certifications, because those loopholes have been plugged up. And so there's not, what they need to look for is just like on a pump, is it certified to UL, NSF, whatever the case may be. So the drain covers is who is the certifying agency, NSF, UL, whatever the case may be. And then once they see that, now they say, okay, this is a highly certified product. Now what is its flow rating as installed? So we can just turn our focus on what are we doing in the pool? What's our flow rates? What's our sump depths? And we can focus on the things that we as manufacturers and regulators can't control. We are dependent, all of us are dependent on the installers to get it right to protect public safety. And so, again, unblockable and blockable will begin to show up on the drain covers. And one of the things, I'm a huge fan of the unblockables because they don't have to stick up. They can be flat and flush mount because they stick out from under the person or the kid, certainly, or, the test apparatus. So it makes them so you don't have to trip over them. Even that said, is even the channel drains and some of this flat stuff, if you look close, they stick up a little bit. But the main thing is they don't stick up, 2 inches. So it makes life better. Here, I just brought up a slide that addresses how we rate the flow rates based on blockable or unblockable. So I have a 10-inch round drain on the screen, and this is obviously blockable. It's smaller than 18 inches. And the top view, there's 2 drains, and they're separated by 3 feet. And so what is the flow rating of that system? You assume one of them is blocked because they're blockable, and then the other one provides your flow rating. So in this example, it's 170 gallons a minute is what this drain cover is rated at in this application. You assume one's blocked, so the flow rating of the system is 170. Directly below it is the same dual drains, but now there's a third drain in between them. So the outer 2 are still 3 feet apart, and the one in the middle is not. That is okay under federal law and ANSI standards, but the same concept applies. You assumed one is blocked, and then you add up the other 2. So 170 plus 170, this system flow rating is 400 or 340. So one of the things that we're going to see coming down with smaller pipe is these flow ratings for this same, I go back to the Acme example I talked about earlier, smaller pipe, smaller flow rates. So if you have a favorite for designers, if you have a favorite drain cover that you like to use and find out, well, you like to use 2-inch pipe, and all of a sudden, oh, wow, this drain cover now has a max flow rating below what my variable speed pump can do. There's an easy solution, add a third or a fourth, The other option is you go to bigger channel drains, typically have much higher flow rates. So you have some options. So it's not difficult, but there is more to pay attention to. In this next slide, we have 3 channel drains and they're right next to each other. And hypothetically, we'll call this with a flow rating of 200 each. Well, you add all 3 of them up. And so the 3 times 200 gives you 600 gallons per minute. And that's really conservative because each of that 200 gallons per minute is with the drain block. So this presumes all 3 of them are blocked, and it still has a flow rating of 600. If we were to unblock them and just use the 1.5 feet per second, that number would go up. But so that's where the 1.5 feet per second rule through drain covers that we see in public pools, for example, in Florida, that doesn't qualify under federal law because they have to be tested. Now, they can certainly be used that way, provided that 1.5 feet per second flow rate is not higher than the VGBA tested flow rate. And I can tell you about a quarter of the drains out there have flow ratings that are less than 1.5 feet per second. So be careful. You can comply with a local code and still be violating federal law. So you got to do a two-step in places on public pools with velocity limits. So that's a gotcha to pay attention to. And then another aspect of the unblockables, there is no minimum separation. So here we have a photo of a couple of channel drains, and they're about a foot and a half apart, certainly not 3 feet. And they're in a spa where you couldn't get them 3 feet apart. And so that is allowed because there's no minimum, because they've been tested blocked. That said, if you're designing pools or bigger spas where you have 3 feet, please, please, please do your design, your plan reviewer and your health department and everyone who inspects this pool over the next 40 years. If you have room to keep them more than 3 feet apart, do, just to not drive people crazy. And it'll save you answering questions. But in a crowded spa, which is where channel drains are often used, you can move them closer together. So separate 3 feet when practical. So what does this mean for operators? We have some information. It's a manufacturer specification. That have to, the key, a key gotcha here is manufacturers now have to say whether or not they want their single blockable drain used with, say, an SVRS or safety vacuum release system. Okay. There's some that just do not want any part of putting a drain cover on a single drain. It's not a risk they're willing to take. They have the authority to say, don't use my product that way. I can speak for Aquastar. We have some that are designed for that. We have others that are dual drain only. So it goes back to, please look at the product specifications before you buy it, so you know if you're dealing with a single drain pool in particular. So be aware of that. So that's the important thing. You need to look at the installed suction system flow rating. There's a short, one of the things that's kind of shorthand is if you have a pump that can go to 125 gallons a minute and your drains are rated for 150, you don't need to worry about flow rate. The pump can't get to the drain cover flow rating. But if the reverse is true, which we're going to start seeing a lot more of because of the dedicated purpose pool pump rule. That's a new federal law by the Department of Energy that basically is going to outlaw single speed pumps, 1 horsepower and larger. It's more nuanced than that. Basically, everything's going variable speed, like it or not. Mm-hmm. And much like the drain cover thing, it's a manufacturing date. And I believe that's July 21st, 2021. It might be the 19th, but it's mid-July. And then just like the drain cover manufacturers, they're not going to be able to make or import, horse and a half single speed pumps anymore. That means people, when they die, they're going to have to be replaced by variable speed. Those typically have higher performance, certainly higher energy efficiency. But now when you replace those pumps, you have to be aware of what did I just do to my VGBA compliance. And so you're going to look at first easy thing is to look at the high speed flow rating of the pump. And if that's lower than your drain covers, whether they be installed or you're going to replace them, then you're good. It's easy. But in a lot of cases, especially on 8-inch, probably almost all 8-inch, is the flow rating of the cover is going to be less than these new pumps. So now what we have to do is look at what is the actual flow in the pool. Because if you have 2-inch pipe connected to a 3 horsepower variable speed pump, that pump maybe has can get to 160 gallons a minute. But when you connect it to 2-inch pipe and move that pump 20 feet away from the pool, there is no way physics is going to push that much water to that pump. Atmosphere pushes, pumps don't suck. So so small pipe, you get to 1.5 inches and you'll be lucky to get above 70 gallons a minute on that 3 horsepower pump. So when you have a mismatch, the drain cover has a flow rating that's less than what the pump can achieve. Now you got to start looking at what can the pump actually do. Public pools, we have flow meters, so we can look at those. And in this regard, I'm gonna, really emphasize to our inspectors and public health officials that evaluate pools on an annual basis. One, they're going to start dealing with variable speed pumps. It's just a fact of life. And we're going to have this VGBA mismatch. And so what we're going to have to start doing is looking at how much water is really going through the submerged suction system. And it could be, if it's a skimmer pool, you can do this safely, is you can turn off the skimmers, right, for an inspection kind of thing. Now, what's the flow meter say? Now you know that's going through your drains, and it will be a fraction of what that pump can actually produce. And then certainly the contractors doing these installations, water doesn't care where it is, whether it's a public pool or residential pool, we want the same safety. So use those same skills to check your residential pools. If you're unsure on those, you can use TDH, where you measure the, and I'm jumping ahead in the slides because I think I have a pump curve here somewhere. Here we go. So what I brought up is a classic pump curve, and this says it's a 1 horsepower pump, and the pump curve at 0 gallons a minute, 80 feet ahead. Its max flow at 25 feet ahead is 120 gallons a minute. So if your drain cover is only rated for 100 and you look at this pump curve, then you're going to say, wait, we can move more water than the drain cover can handle. That triggers the need to look, if there's no flow meter, that triggers the need to look at what is your hydraulics. So you can measure the TDH, vacuum and pressure. Hydraulic courses, you can see YouTube on how to do this kind of a thing. So in this example, the measured TDH was 60. So obviously an old sand filter, right? 60 TDH. And then you go over where it intercepts the pump curve and then go down, and it's 70 gallons a minute. So this hypothetical, this pool is actually operating at 70 gallons a minute. So that 100 gallon per minute rated drain cover is fine. And so this is a very important tool. It was really used heavily in 2009 and 10 by public health officials out west, because there was lots of very big pumps and boosters. And, Las Vegas does a lot of wild and crazy things with, whole rooms full of pumps. And the health department had to say, I got to evaluate each one of these. And TDH became a huge tool. So it's a great tool for contractors, and it's a good tool for inspectors also. So the next picture I'm showing is, and this is real, this is our 10-inch drain. And we have, there's 2 pictures of the mud frame or the adapter frame installed. On the left is 3-inch pipe in the middle of the sump, a field-built sump, and it's only 3-inch deep. So it's kind of a funnel shape. And that flow rating is 170 gallons a minute. Now, that exact same drain cover is installed over the same 3-inch pipe, but it's 0 sump. So basically, cut a hole in the floor of the pool, cut the pipe off flush, and mount a drain cover over it. It's what we call a 0 sump depth drain cover. That flow rating is 138. So I use this, these are real certified numbers, and I use this information to demonstrate that shallow sumps are going to have a lower flow rate. So these are the pools we have to pay close attention to. And that's why Aquastar, our priority has been to test these covers first, get them into the market. Because when you buy a sump and cover for new construction, spa fittings, all of those have been tested together. So those are easy. The problem is, what do we do with these old pools? So that's been our focus. We just use this as an illustration. Again, I'll say it again for those listening. 3-inch pipe, 3 inches deep is 170 gallons a minute. 3-inch pipe, 0 inches deep is 138. Both of those numbers.
Big difference.
Yeah, big difference. but in the real world, both of those are probably below what the pool is operating at. So that's kind of one of the focus we've been looking at as we've done thousands of tests is how is this going to impact the market? And I have to say early on, I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. It's 2009 again. Now that we've been through thousands of tests, just follow the instructions, measure what you're really getting in the pool. And I think it's going to be rare that it's a real problem, but the plastic swap, like for like replacements are going to be a potential gotcha. So, and because the covers have to be certified and they have to be installed for that certification, you can't get a waiver from a health department that says, oh no, you can ignore federal law. They could be more restrictive, but they can't be less restrictive. So that's kind of the technical stuff I wanted to cover. Any questions you may have from your perspective?
No, everything's pretty straightforward. And I think it's really been straightforward for the audience listening as well.
Good. Glad to hear it.
I think you're going to get into available resources to our listeners.
Yeah. So let's touch on that. It's a slide. It's just got 3 points. They really end up taking you to the same place. Is number one, the very first step in this is you got to look at the manufacturer specifications. And then the second part of that is that make sure it's actually certified by an ISO accredited agency. And that's all the majors. That's NSF, UL, IAPMO, and I apologize to the other certifier. I can never remember their name. But so what you'll want to do is just look at the specifications in the agency listing. That's certainly where the public health officials and building officials almost start and stop, right? Well, they're going to look at how it's applied and installed. But really, at that point, there used to be, no openings bigger than a 1/2 inch and velocities through the cover. All of that is 100% tested under federal law. So there's no more work to be done for these new 2017 covers. So the next step in that is the manufacturer's installation, operation, and maintenance instructions. That's going to be, it'll have what do you do in winterizing? How do you winterize? How do I know if a fastener is stripped out? If it is stripped out, what do I do? And I'll use Aquastar as an example again. Some we have retros that actually have concrete anchors that are included with them. We know old mud frames and things are old and brittle. So we provide a means for concrete pools to install anchors and what I call abandoning in place that old mud frame that's stripped out. So if you can anchor to the pool, and that's included in the product instructions, you have that option. We have many more covers that are not retrofit. If it can't be screwed down to an existing sump, be it our manufactured sump or someone else's or a mud frame, then it's not appropriate to use. Please don't use it, because if you do and the cover pulls off because it wasn't secure and somebody gets hurt and there's a lawyer involved, by you not following the instructions, you just gave us manufacturers, see ya, we are not part of this because you did not follow one, federal law. There's no excuse. No failure to warn issue for failing to follow federal law. And when federal law says you have to follow our instructions. So that's where we, as a standard writer, we really tried to make sure we provided all the information that the contractors need.
So everybody listening, you got to install these covers per what the manufacturer gives you in their manual or whatever that comes with the drain cover. If you do something differently, then that's where you put yourself at liability if something happens.
Yeah, if you don't follow our instructions, we help you through our instructions. Right. The third element on this slide is contact the manufacturer. I get them all the time, from public health officials to installers and designers and everything. And I'll get oddball pictures of weird pipe under weird sumps and then what I do with that. So there is a flexibility by us manufacturers to give you guidance and say, oh, okay, you can add a screw hole here, or you can go through, you can do this. but you can't do that. So we have authority under the federal law and as the drain cover manufacturers to give you guidance when there's some subject, because the number of things we face in the pool industry is just unlimited, right? So there's no way a standard or our instructions can cover everything. So we have flexibility as manufacturers to help you within boundaries. What we can't do is change the flow path where the hair goes. So we can't cut drain covers in half so they fit up against, because the pipe's too close to the spa bench. But if it has what I'll call a riser ring that's solid, no water, and it's just to get it up so it's high enough so that the body block tests, well, that's not part of the flow path. So we can, with a few of our covers, authorize, you can cut here or you can add a screw hole here, but what we can't do is change anything where the water flows. So don't even ask. We can't help you. That would be, okay, look for another. We can help you. Manufacturers can help you select a different cover that would be more appropriate. But so to reiterate, what's on this screen is start with the manufacturer's specifications and their agency. All of that is required to be available to you prior to the sale. There's this thing called the internet that's often helping. Often it's not, but so online, certainly Aquastar will have all of our instructions for everything we've ever produced is there now, but our new instructions are way more detailed, and we are making those available as the product is certified by NSF, because they have to certify the instructions. So we can't even make them publicly available until our product's certified. But as we get them certified before they leave our warehouse, that'll be available. Another thing is a general certificate of conformity. That is federal law that manufacturers make available on their website if they don't provide it with the product. I think all of us put it on our website. There's a lot more detail associated with that information per the standard, where it was tested, when it was tested, and who it was tested by. And that really comes from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. It's not even part of VGB. It's for, car seats and cribs and the flame testing for mattresses. So if you drop a cigarette on it, it doesn't burn your house down, all of those. So that's really a general law for anything that's a consumer product safety standard, of which our pool industry is one. So another aspect for resource, real important on the bottom of this slide, is the drain cover standard. It's a yellow standard from the PHTA. Really, that who needs this standard is manufacturers and test labs for sure, but also registered design professionals or anyone who's inspecting or certifying public pools. You can inspect manufactured products, but the only thing you can do is inspect to see if they were installed according to the instructions. An engineer cannot specify a different sump, for example. And let me go back and circle back and clarify something I think I've neglected, is the minimum pipe depth that I keep talking about in size. The minimum depth is that it's a minimum. So if they're tested at 0 sump, obviously anything works. 3-inch, if you're deeper, so if it's a plastic sump that's 6 inches deep, which is pretty typical, you can definitely use any cover with a shallower flow rate. So these are minimum sump depths, not maximums. So, and that's where the test labs and us, we're testing as shallow as possible to give flexibility. But we also recognize there's a lot of big product out there, certainly your public pool, your 12 by 12s and 18 by 18s, for example, that are really deep. And so I can tell you some of those, the old 12 by 12 flow ratings might have been 400. We test these on these really big sumps. We've tested all the way up to 900 gallons a minute. Ooh. That doesn't mean we're listing them there, because 900 gallons a minute through a 12-inch drain cover makes no business sense. Just because it's safe doesn't mean anyone ought to do it, right? Yeah, exactly. Who wants pipe velocities at 20 feet a second? That's where that's at. But so, and I'll use that to segue, is the way to think about the VGB flow ratings is it's really the red line on your car. So you have a tachometer if you got most modern cars will have. So that red line for your engine could be at 9,000 RPM. Right? And that's where you blow up the engine and end up in the ditch. That's a bad day. That's the VGB flow rate. pool code is analogous to the speed limit, and it's 55, right? Okay, so we know people speed, and we don't want the engine to blow up at 56 miles an hour, right? So those engines can go a lot, our tires and everything speed rated can go a lot faster than that. And so the VGBA ratings are really the hard limit. And once you get into the pipe size flow ratings that I've mentioned numerous times here, what you're going to find is when you build the building code at 6 feet per second for a public pool or 8 feet per second for a residential pool, you're going to find those actual flow rates are half or 2/3 of the VGB flow rating. That's why I'm confident. This is going to be a pain in the neck. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be a challenge to adapt. But once we get down to really measuring what our pools are doing, I think we're fine. And that makes sense because we are not having entrapments, right? If we had a crisis because we didn't have all of these flow rates for 1.5 2, 2.5 3, we would have people getting hurt, and we don't have it. So we don't have a crisis, but we have to move along carefully. Another analogy I have used is really with drain covers and suction safety pre-VGB. It was a little bit like the old electrical systems with the Frankenstein switches in the 20s and 40s, right? It's all great. Just grab that rubber handle, move that wishbone shaped thing down, and life's good. The lights go on and off, but don't lean against it, right? And then later we came up with fuses that kept us from burning down houses, and then circuit breakers, and then GFCIs. Nice. And okay, so really where we are in the pool industry now, we are all the way up with drain covers. With this next standard, we're going from circuit breakers to GFCIs with the level of sophistication. It's not easy, but I think it's the right thing. And part of my using that analogy is I'm not seeing in the future that there's going to be big changes. If anything, I see is the pendulum's going to come back a little bit and give us a little bit more flexibility. For example, when I look at if every blockable drain cover is tested and is safe as a single drain connected to a big pump, then why do we have to assume one is blocked? We could add up those flow rates. I'm not suggesting that. I just freaked out all the code officials. But what if we want to be science driven? The goal as we move through future ANSI revisions is to make this easier for everyone, not harder, because I'm convinced we've got the safety issues addressed.
Wow. That was a lot of information. Even though some of us have heard it's not a big update like 2008, but it's still a lot. And of course, they still, and the listeners, I'm going to pose this question. They still got to comply with all their expiration dates for their drain covers.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that doesn't end. That was part of the 2008 part. So I always get asked, how are these expiration dates created? Sometimes they think that it's a money thing. They don't understand where I know, but I want you to answer from being on the writing committee. In general, where do these expiration dates come from for drain covers?
Sure. So the nothing lasts forever, especially in South Florida or Arizona, where I'm from. You put plastic lawn chairs out. Are you going to want to sit on that plastic lawn chair 20 years from now? Get a YouTube video running right before you sit down, because you're going to end up on the ground because it breaks. Things turn. The reality is if we're talking about plastic drain covers, they are going to be UV degraded. The plastic itself gets brittle over time once it's in pool water, and even if it's an indoor pool. So basically the standard says, hey, physics say nothing lasts forever, and we got to make sure that those drain covers are replaced before they fail in an emergency.
Right.
So that's the overarching
the
reason.
Easy way to say it to them. And you guys do, I know you guys do environmental testing to mask what, would be like in the outside in the pool, UV radiation, chemical degradation, all that good stuff. And a lot of times they'll go, well, we had the old main drain grates that were on the pool for 20 years. And I always have to remind them when they're in my classes and stuff, yes, but there was no VGB rule when these old main drain grates were on the pool. So nobody said they had to be replaced, even though they should have been a long time ago, and they could have broken very easily during that 20-year period. We've added more standards, like you said, and then even this update now is just tweaking what we already had to make it better, just like electrical safety that you gave a good example of. We're tweaking to make the standard better and more safer, and it was already really safe now, but before 2008, it definitely wasn't. And that's the difference between, am I correct, with the old main drain grates down there on the bottom of the pool versus when we started doing VGB main drain covers?
Generally speaking, the result I totally agree with. When you go to individual different cover designs, there were some really bad and there were some really good. But when you look at generally, those of us who have been around for a while, none of those the drain covers you installed in 2005, you can't buy them anymore.
Right.
And part of it, you mentioned the UV. One of the things that's required under federal law is if it's plastic, it has to be exposed to extremely harsh UV for the equivalent of 15 years. So that was another thing that took drain cover plastics out of the market. They just can't pass. And so I sensitive and understand the money side of this. One of the reasons drain covers got more expensive is you can't use the cheap plastic anymore. It doesn't pass. And on that, one of the things is we as a company have drain covers. The majority of our stuff is probably at the 5-year mark. We have commercial product stuff, but it's 1 inch thick and weighs a ton that goes 10 years. And it, you get what you pay for to a degree, but really there's lots of plastics in between. And back to your original question about the expiration date, that's the hazard of jumping around in a PowerPoint and not doing it in order, is I completely missed one of the really, really important aspects of this change. And let me quote, this is section 1.1 from the standard, effective date, quote, this standard becomes effective 18 months. All right, that was May 24th. Let me go to the next one. So that was in the standard, and it was 18 months after the standard was approved, and we manufacturers have to apply. We wanted to avoid a 2008 scenario, but that wasn't the point I was after, because we already passed that deadline. 1.1.2, existing product compliance. SOFA components that were manufactured or installed before the effective date of this standard, that was May 24th, 2021, and meet the prior standard shall be considered in compliance with this standard. So under federal law, if it was an approved drain cover from, VGB 2008 drain cover, it is not expired, meaning it hasn't been in the pool more than 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, whatever its specific life is that's marked on it, then it is in compliance. So that's important to understand, because those drain covers in the pool that are not expired could be there's a pair of dual drains in the public pool warehouse ready. They're a responsible CPO, so they've got a replacement in case one breaks or whatever. Those are compliant, and their clock doesn't start until they're installed. And there could be stuff in the distribution pipeline, even in the warehouse behind me, that powder blue special we're running. So that's why I had the slide where it had the old one and the new one. They're identical drain covers, just different manufacturing dates. So it's hugely important to know, so long as it complied with the original standard and hasn't expired in the pool, you don't need to do anything. It's when it expires, then you need to do it.
So if they're getting the older drain covers still from their local distributor, they can still install these on the pool as long as they meet the requirement of the VGB 2008 and it's not expired from the date that's marked on the cover per manufacturer.
I'm glad you said that, because that's a common misconception. It's not what's marked on the cover, because that's when we made it. The clock does. So if we have a 5-year cover that clock doesn't start when we molded it. That's when the born on date shows up on the product. It's when it goes into the pool. It could sit on
date of installation.
Yeah. So that's hugely important. And over the years, there's been a lot of confusion, especially in 2016 with our product, because we mark our product APSP 16 2011. So there's literally 2011 on a lot of our drain covers. Our phone rang off the hook in 2016. It's like, oh no, I just bought a cover and it's expired. It's like, no.
I know when I was at the health department, we had the form that we were required to be submitted for a drain cover change out as they were being expired, so that we had the information on the model, who it was, and we looked at date of installation, and then we had a spot in our database that we put in data installation, and then whatever, we had a list. I always had a list up on my bulletin board, all the drain covers and their expiration dates. And so I would go, okay, from date of installation, it's 5, 7, or 10 years out from that date. But it's always the day before the date of installation, because that's actually the 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years out. And
so on that, I can tell you it's a month and year is the designation. So, I give you a month window kind of a thing.
You got a grace period. You got a grace period.
Yeah. And they aren't going to just suddenly break on the 30th day either. Not, we need to get
probably set these time periods on being more reactive, being proactive than reactive at that point. And I can tell you, I've seen, and I've got 2 models. I don't know if they're the same year or not, but I have a brand new one. I'm not going to say manufacturer or anything. When I teach class, I have a brand new one I gotten, from a manufacturer at a show to show. And then I was out doing a consultation at a public pool, and it must have been their old drain cover, same manufacturer model and everything, sitting in their equipment area. They must have just left the old one in there. And I asked the pool guy, are you going to do anything with that? Can I have that? And he goes, sure. And he's like, why? I showed the 2 drain covers next to each other, and this one's all nice and white and everything, and this one's all yellow. It's got a nick in the plastic. It looks like the plastic's it will degrade. So I like to show that as the difference when people ask about the expiration dates. I'm very well aware, working at, it used to be a health official, why those are there, but that's a common question when it comes to drain covers all the time about the expiration dates, why, who came up with that, so we've answered that very well. But I wanted to state what I show when I teach a class is the difference between new and old. And this is why. And I think when people visually see the difference, then they go, oh, okay. And then they stop questioning it at that point. And I really like that when I do that. It takes that whole questioning thing that would go for 5 or 10 minutes. And I get that extra 10 minutes in my class.
Yeah. UV is brutal. And so I'd encourage everybody in the Sun Belt, residential, this is where we have the problem. This is where the entrapments continue to happen. Missing covers is unfortunately tragically common. Homeowners just don't know that hole in the bottom of the pool is potentially deadly.
I'm sure Airbnbs, as they've increased in popularity, and vacation rentals and stuff like that, they're basically a residential pool, but you got so many people coming and going from there. So that increases entrapment likelihoods as well, if there's a missing drain cover or anything like that.
Yeah, all too often on the public pool hair entrapments that we've seen since, where there was something wrong that wasn't VGB compliant, is, that's one of the things is my role is to look at what is the root cause, how did this happen, how do we prevent it in the future? And plugged up drain covers is one of the things. It's a dual drain, but one of them's all plugged up with leaves. So now we're back to a single drain. And while there's not been a single body entrapment on one of these new ones that stick up, we've had multiple hair entrapments. But one of the things I've looked just at human nature is people visiting a location where they don't have a pool. And so they're new to the pool environment, and drowning risks are certainly increased because maybe they don't know how to swim. But then also it's girls doing handstands over drains. or holding their breath in spas down next to a sidewall suction. Those are the two cases that have happened in the last several years, non-VGB compliant. But
so much for being on my podcast today and going over all these updates to the VGB rule.
Glad to do it. It's helpful information, I hope. Just keep in mind, when you start getting these drain covers, look at the instructions. It's going to be specific to each one. If it's in a pool already and compliant, you don't have to change it out till they expire. So this is a rolling change on the manufacturers. I expect you're going to start to see product in the next few months, certainly next season. I think everyone's going to be in the middle of it. So this show season, be it everything under the sun, whatever, this is the off season to make sure you learn the latest, visit your manufacturer, talk to your manufacturers so that they can help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for diving in today with the Let's Talk About Pools podcast. Be sure to follow us on our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. And feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts so more aquatic professionals like you can learn about the show. We appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Let's Talk About Pools podcast.